Welcome to Unexpected Points. I am your host, Kevin Cole. This is the Friday edition where I'm going to go through every week 4 game. I'm going to preview that. I have a somewhat new system here where I've been pulling together a bunch of different pieces of information, stats, trends that may be a little bit undervalued. And I'm also going to focus a bit more on the betting angles here. It's tough the first few weeks of the season to make hay of what's going on here. This week, I'm going to talk more about plays that I like. For anyone who follows me on Twitter, and I forgot to mention this in the Tuesday show, was the fact of how much I liked the Jaguars plus the 7.5 points. You know, I mentioned it on another podcast, which I retweeted out there. I mentioned it on the PFF Daily Betting podcast. I tweeted about it separately a couple of times. So I'm going to go ahead and log that one as a W for myself. As you know, if you watched the game last night, which ended up being pretty good, I think, the Bengals won by a last-second field goal. Just to quickly go over what happened in that game, the expected, unexpected stuff that went on. I mean, I'll say that what was a little bit unexpected was the fact that there was no pressure on either guy. I mean, both of these defensive fronts can't generate much pressure, but the offensive lines also have not been good in the competition that they've faced. But the Bengals, you know, maybe there is something going on there. They've been giving up what was a very, very high sack rate to Joe Burrow. He had one of the highest sack rates in the league, but the last couple of weeks, they've done a better job protecting him, although he did take 1 sack in this game. And he took another on a play that ended up getting called back because of a defensive hold, I believe. And just overall in the game, broad picture, who played better or worse than the score? I would say that I would slightly lean towards the Jaguars being about equal to the Bengals in this game, although they ended up losing the game. The reason being, there are a couple of things that offset. The Bengals missed a very, very makeable field goal. So that was an EPA loss of almost 3 points because of the fact that not only did they not get the 3 points from the very makeable field goal, but they give up a little field position there too when they had to give that up. So there's that. The Jags did not convert the 4th down, which was less than a yard near the goal line. The lost EPA on that was more than 4. And in reality, because they're so close, it was really less than a yard. I think you could maybe even skew it a little bit higher than that. So that netted out that way. And you know, the headline stats for the Bengals, if you're going to look at how good they were from a efficiency standpoint, I mean, Burrow was better than Lawrence, right? Burrow was averaging 0.44 EPA per play versus 0.25 for Lawrence, but those are both really solid numbers. But if you look at the success rate numbers, the Jaguars were actually better in both categories. They were better rushing the ball, just efficiency-wise, period. But they also had higher success rate. They had a total 55% success rate, only 53 for the Bengals. So the way that the Bengals derived all of this extra EPA here, and the fact that they had a higher EPA for the game, was mostly, I'd say, the most unexpected things were 2 very long passes to the tight end, CJ Uzoma, I don't know. I can never say his name correctly. But, you know, he was targeted 6 times and they got 8 EPA out of those targets, which was huge. If you look at the biggest plays in the game, he got, let me see, it was the second most valuable play of the game. About 4 EPA on the 31-yard touchdown. That was on 3rd and 3. And then, you know, he got another touchdown on 2nd and 7 for 22 yards. That was 2.5 EPA. So those are huge. And those are really, really big numbers. Burrow also had a big pass down the sideline to Jamar Chase, which is a big play. And on the other side, you know, the one kind of play that I'll say was a little bit on the fluky side is probably Lawrence's long pass to Laviska Shenault. And Shenault was huge in this game. I think it was a breakout game for Shenault. I was expecting Marvin Jones to be more involved. He had been leading the team in air yards, but he came through there. And the other thing that I would say was a little bit unexpected in this game is the lack of turnovers, right? Because Burrow had, you know, some of the most interceptions in the league. He had the worst score as far as negative EPA via interceptions going into this game. But in this game, they were, you know, both teams very clean. No INTs, no fumbles lost, only that one turnover on downs that I mentioned. So it was a very, very clean game. Never really in doubt as far as the 7.5 was concerned for the Jaguars. So it's fun to put a little something on these games, to have a little sweat. And I'll just throw out the disclaimer before I get into the rest of the games for this week that I'm a believer in efficient markets, especially in betting sides and totals in the NFL, in particular going into the weekend. But I'm still going to talk about some of these and some of these underplayed stats, which I think can help maybe get a slightest bit of edge if you want to. And it also, like I said, it makes it some fun to watch the games on the weekend. But before I get into that, I want to highlight some of the tools that I'm going to be talking about here that you can get with an Edge or Elite subscription. All of our green line stuff, all of our stats that go into some of these advanced stats that I'm going to be talking about as part of my analysis. That's all at pff.com, locked article content, and then of course DFS stuff that we're putting together, and the grades on every player, player prop tool, which is plus minus on every player there. So check out the highest graded players for week 3 and find early value on spread picks and player props for week 4 at PFF. And then I'll also hit up Draftkings, because Draftkings, if you're interested in playing some of these, a few games that I'm going to mention, I'm only going to highlight a few that I think are really worth playing this week. But week 3 of the football is in the books, and now it's time to review the tape and get ready for week 4. I guess week 4 has already started technically. And with Draftkings Sportsbook, kick off another action-packed week. Draftkings is giving new customers $150 instantly when they bet $1 on any football game. Listen up, because you don't want to miss this. Head to DraftKings Sportsbook app now and place a bet of $1 on any week 1 game to receive $150 in free bets instantly. If the Sportsbook is not available in your state, DraftKings still has huge cash prizes up all season long with their daily fantasy contests. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF to receive $150 in free bets when you place a $1 bet on any football game. That's promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only, new customers only, minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required. 1 per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. All right, so let's get to the stats. So the first game I'm going to talk about is actually another game that I'm going to like a little bit of a play on, and that is the Falcons are at home against the good old Washington football team. So let me give you some of the headline stuff here for this game. It is, as of the numbers I'm looking at right now, 1.5 points. It is a total of 47.5. So that is an implied number of 23 points for the Falcons and 24.5 points for the football team. And I'm going to tell you why I like Washington in this game. So Washington's had a pretty strong run offense so far, but I don't think that really matters that much. What's really going to look at is a few of the less predictable stuff that's ended up hurting the good old football team. One of them is fumbles. So if we look at the total fumble EPA gain or loss off of fumbles, and fumbles are some of the flukiest plays you can have out there, the football team has lost about 6 points in EPA net so far this year. They've lost 9.5 on offense alone. And then if you look at the Falcons, they've gained about 4 EPA so far this year. So they've had a little bit of fumble luck, and yet they still have had these poor performances this year. Another stat that I'm talking about in a lot of these games, doesn't really apply too much in here, is the pass rate over expectation. We want those teams that are juicing up their scores through higher pass rates. Both of these teams have been about in line with expectations so far this year. Atlanta's expectation has been higher because they've been trailing more. Atlanta, as I mentioned when I did the wrap up last week, they were the worst team against the Giants, even though they ended up coming through and winning there. They're not passing the ball downfield much at all. And I think it's important, if you're going to look at, Matt Ryan this season, if you look at his long passing rate, right? So this is the rate of passes that he's throwing more than 15 yards this year. It's 7.7%. With at least 15 air yards. It was 17.6% the year before, and then 21.9%. I'm sorry, it was 21.9% in 2020, and then it was 17.6% in 2019. So it's a huge drop. It was pretty steady the last couple of years, and it dropped off. The EPA that he's generated on those longer throws, it's negative right now. So it's more incompletions than completions now. He's at negative about 4 EPA, whereas he was getting a healthy chunk of his EPA off of those longer passes. He totaled, over 60 EPA both of the last 2 years that he's been playing in there. If you look at his average depth of target, the average depth of target has dropped from 9.3 the year before to 4.9 so far this year. But a lot of the other peripherals are pretty similar. Positive graded throw rate is way, way down. Again, he's someone who was around 25%. Now it's down to 16%. Big time throws, less than 0.1%. After being around 4 or 5% in previous years, but yet the turnover worthy plays are the same. So I think one of the things that we've seen in studies on aging, and this is one of the reasons I'm so concerned about Matt Ryan, is as players get old, when they near the end, when they near the drop off for quarterbacks, what you traditionally see is not a huge jump in negative play, like negative play. So their negative graded throws don't necessarily go up a lot. Their turnover worthy plays don't necessarily go up a lot, but they lose the ability to make plays, to make big positive plays. And that's exactly what we're seeing from Ryan right now. So he was really falling into that category of a guy who potentially is falling off a cliff. So because of those signals, I'm a little bit more confident that he might actually be reaching cooked status here. And because of that, this is another reason to be interested in the football team this week. Some other stats that I think are screaming, hey, we should really be looking at what's going on in this matchup is the pressures. So there's a couple different ways I'm going to look at pressure here. One of them is your pressure rate. The other one is what I'm going to call fast pressure rate. And the fast pressure I'm defining as any pressure that happens in less than 2.4 seconds. 2.4 seconds is the median pressure time. So when you're getting fast pressure, those are much more likely to translate into sacks. They're much more likely to be sticky because it's not something that's about the back end as much. Coverage play is a lot less sticky than defensive line pressure play, and especially less sticky with these fast pressures because you're not relying upon a quote unquote coverage sack to get this. You're not relying upon the flukier aspects of the game to get this. So if you look at the football team, again, they've had trouble getting sacks. They don't have the high, they're kind of mid-tier when it comes to mid to low tier when it comes to the EPA that they've derived off of sacking the other team, but yet their pressure rate is 13th and their fast pressure rate is 14th. So again, not as high as you would like to see from them. You'd like to see them, above 5 in the top 5 or something like that. But if you also think about the quarterbacks that they played, I mean, they have had a play against Herbert, who's been getting the ball out of his hands pretty quickly. They should have done better against Daniel Jones. I think that's true. And then they did a good job with Josh Allen in that offense. So they've played some good pressure, some good play there. Guys who aren't necessarily taking a lot of sacks and pressure, at least in the first 2. And then for Daniel Jones, he had some long runs. He had some other plays where he ended up keeping that game close through using his legs. And there's a little bit on the flukier side. Another thing that I'll mention here is third down conversions. I'm going to hit on quite a bit here. So I have a model which looks at the distance, field position, all that sort of stuff, and tries to figure out what is the probability of a third, or I should call it late down conversion. So a third or fourth down conversion, and then compares that to how often they're actually able to convert it. There's a lot of variation in this. Sometimes there are certain players who are sticky, like there are players like Patrick Mahomes, who seems to season over season always convert more third downs and fourth downs than you'd expect. There are others that fall on the other side, but generally these are stats that are going to revert either way. So if we look at the net number for these two different teams, on the offensive side of things, both teams have had trouble converting late downs. The Falcons have 3.5 fewer conversions than you would expect. The Washington football team is 3 fewer conversions, so it's close there. So both of those teams may have a chance to regress a bit. But like I said, I'm a little concerned about Matt Ryan and his ability to not falling off a cliff here. But on the defensive side, there's basically nothing for the Falcons. But the football team defense, this is where they've really gotten hurt this year, is third down conversions. They weren't able to stop Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, and those are 2 guys who I think may be saying more about them and those offenses on third down than they're saying about Washington's inability to stop third downs. They've given up 7 more conversions on third down than you would have expected. 7 more. If you look at all the teams in the NFL right now, that's the worst as far as giving up the most third or fourth down conversions over expectation. So they've really gotten hurt here. And if you look at net, they're also the worst. If you combine offense and defense, how many times they've gotten hurt? They have about 10 fewer, a combination of fewer offensive conversions or giving up too many defensive conversions. So they've been hurt the most on late downs this year. So I don't think the defense is nearly as bad as some people believe that it might be. I think it's really a function of the fact that they've gotten unlucky on some of the fumble stuff. They've gotten unlucky on the conversions. They've gotten a little bit unlucky playing against Herbert and Josh Allen, who are 2 strong quarterbacks. And they've been getting some pressure, but those pressures are now going to start to translate more to negative EPA, which hasn't happened so far. And you combine that with the fact that there's definitive evidence that Matt Ryan is looking pretty cooked here because of the lack of high-end plays. I think I'm going to lock in the football team -1.5 here against Atlanta, but against Atlanta as a very, very strong play. Okay, so the next game we have on the agenda here is the Buffalo Bills at home against the Houston Texans. This is an ugly one, 17 points. The implied number for the Texans is only 15. So this is looking really, really bad. I mean, there's not a whole lot to say here. Buffalo's run defense has been really strong this year, and their pass defense has been strong. They have a third-ranked defense in EPA per play, which I was a little bit surprised to see. I was also a little bit surprised to see that their pressure, they're getting a lot of pressure. I didn't necessarily think of them as being a strong pressure team. So it's kind of a bad matchup with the Texans because the Texans are giving up a ton of pressure. They gave up a ton of fast pressures. The worst team in the league giving up fast pressures. If you look at that game last week against the Panthers were getting fast pressure on 75% of the time. They were getting a pressure in less than that, 2.4 seconds. So they were just crushing there. And if you look at the net conversions, what's interesting is so far this year, that Buffalo team is converting more late downs on offense than you'd expect and is giving up fewer conversions on defense than you'd expect. Again, I think there's some regression maybe there for Buffalo, but not a ton. The problem is it's just a huge, huge number. I do think you could probably blindly bet any NFL team at +17 and hope for the best there. But it's not one that I have a strong opinion on either way. I thought Davis Mills looked pretty good. He graded okay in our system. Like I said, he was heavily under pressure in that game. But at the same point in time, it's really tough to feel at all confident in him. And I'm just less confident in these teams that have rookie quarterbacks starting their second start of all time versus other teams that we have, a few game sample and previous years of those quarterbacks to look at. So I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to skip that one as far as we're not really going to look at any sort of play there. And like I said, I'm not going to try to have a play on everything that's going on here. Okay, so the next game here is the Chicago Bears versus the Detroit Lions. The Bears are a 3-point favorite. To me, that has built into it that Nick Foles or Andy Dalton is probably going to start, or probably one of those two are going to start this game. I think Dalton looks like he's on schedule to start. Fields was awful. I talked about that in the Tuesday pod that you can go back and listen to, as far as everyone trying to heap all this blame on Matt Nagy, but it's really that offense was just as I called it, the proverbial shit sandwich, that everyone was taking a bite of that one. No one was safe there. They have the second worst total offense in EPA per play for the Bears so far this year. The Lions are 23rd. So the Lions aren't great. The Lions defense is really what the problem is. Their drop back defense, they're 32nd in the NFL. They haven't had, the easiest schedule so far. So you could say that. You could say, well, they played against the Ravens. They played against the Packers. They played against the 49ers. So those are offenses that are all pretty capable. But at the same time, it's never good to be dead last. And that's dead last, including the fact that Marquise Brown dropped multiple long touchdowns last week. that could have made it even worse. Some interesting numbers to think about here. The one thing that Detroit really has going for them is they're getting pressure on the quarterback. Now, they haven't been able to translate that pressure into a ton of EPA and to wins, but they're actually fourth. They have the fourth highest fast pressure rate in the NFL. And those quarterbacks that I mentioned that they're playing against, again, San Francisco offensive line, Green Bay is a little bit banged up, their offensive line. There's been some issues there with the Ravens, and Lamar Jackson is someone who likes to hold the ball, but we're talking about fast pressure rate here. So they are a little bit faster than normal. So I think that's interesting. And offensively, they've been okay. The Lions have been okay. And if you look at conversions, both of these teams have been really, really bad as far as their net conversions. They haven't been playing well on third downs at all. So if I were going to lean anyway here, I would lean towards the Lions, I think, with the points here. But I don't have a real strong feeling on this, in particular because I don't really know who's going to be starting for the Bears at quarterback. But the chance that Fields is starting does make it kind of interesting to say you could go in that direction. Okay. The next game here, Dallas and Carolina. So I was singing the Panthers' praises after what they did last Thursday night. And the particular thing you're looking at here is pressure. They have this kind of ghost pressure, simulated pressure defense where they're bringing a bunch of guys up to the line and then peeling some back and then having some go forward. And they've been very, very successful with that. They're first in the NFL with their pressure rate. They're first in the NFL with their fast pressure rate too. So it's not just quarterbacks holding the ball. I know that when you're looking at the Panthers, you could say, oh, well, they played against Zach Wilson, they played against Jameis Winston, and they played against Davis Mills. So it makes a lot of sense, but they're getting there quickly. And those offensive lines, not the Jets so much, maybe not the Texans so much, although they do have Laramie Tunsil and some other guys there. But the Saints have a good offensive line. So they were getting pressure against Jameis in that game. It's not been totally fluky for them, even though they haven't had strong competition. Now, if you look at some of the other metrics that we have here, what's interesting, there's not a whole lot to go off of. Everyone is really gaga over the Cowboys offense and how good it has looked. I mean, they've been okay. The total offense, they're 12th. Carolina's actually been better, 11th in total offense. And what's kept Dallas in some of these games is the fact that they've had some fumble luck defensively. So they've gotten almost 10 EPA off of fumbles so far this year. So I think that has helped them quite a bit, right? Is the fact that they've been able to get a little bit more EPA than you would have thought off of fumbles. And if you also look with the interceptions, I mean, we saw the pick 6 last week, right? So they've also been getting a decent amount of EPA off of interceptions, even though they faced Tom Brady, Justin Herbert, and Jalen Hurts. Now, Hurts maybe isn't necessarily a guy that you'd expect not to throw the ball away a lot, but, they got interception EPA off of Tom Brady, which you wouldn't have expected, right? Based on the fact that there was a drop by Fournette that flew right into someone's hands. They got the fumble luck that we mentioned for the fact that there was a fumble by Chris Godwin down the field. That's a little bit fluky in that game. They got the pick 6 against Jalen Hurts. They got interceptions and some strange kind of uglyish interceptions against Justin Herbert. So for all those different reasons, I think I'm probably believing in Carolina a bit more than some others here. So you have Carolina, you can get the 4.5 points there, which isn't bad. They've had solid defense. They've actually had a better offense, even though everyone is loving the Cowboys offense so far this year. And if you look at the pressure that the Cowboys are getting, I mean, they're 32nd in total pressure. They're 27th in fast pressure. So they're not getting any pressure. So I don't know if they're really going to rattle Sam Darnold that much in this game. So for all of those different reasons, these are both teams that are passing over expectations. So I like that too. They've been good there. I think Christian McCaffrey is an X factor in this game. The fact that he's not there, Chuba Hubbard definitely can't catch nearly as well, but luckily they're not like as dependent on him as I even think New England offense might be dependent upon James White because of the fact that they have, DJ Moore, they have Robbie Anderson, they have other weapons that they can get the ball to there on offense. Terrace Marshall, the rookie that they can get the ball to. So that they have this portfolio of players they can get the ball to, which I think will be important. It hurts to have JC Horn go down with the foot injury, but they're bringing in CJ Henderson. We'll see how he mixes on defense. But I think Carolina has a better chance than most do of covering this here and getting close, and this being more of a toss-up sort of game than a lot of people are giving credit for. Carolina at Dallas. Okay, so the next game here is Miami versus the Indianapolis Colts. Now, just ugly, right? It's a 2-point line. Miami's at home. They're a 2-point favorite. It's 42.5 over under, which is low, and it makes sense. So that brings the implied totals to about 22.25 for the Dolphins and 20 for the Colts. Okay, let's go through some of the big headline numbers here. The Dolphins have the 28th ranked offense and the Colts have the 26th ranked offense in EPA per play. Bad. Both bad. Drop back offenses 27th and 28th. If you look at Jacoby Brissett's numbers last week when he started, he had okay grading, but man, he was only averaging 4-something yards per attempt. He just was not pushing the ball down the field. It was really ugly in that regard. And I think that just really lowers the upside of that offense, especially with players like Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle. If you can't use those guys down the field, I'm a little bit questioning on some of this. Both of these teams have had a ton of fumble luck so far this year. A lot of it has been strip sack fumbles that they've gotten. They're both about 11 to 15 net positive in the fumbles that they've gotten. And they've also not turned the ball over a lot. I mean, that's one thing you can kind of count on from Jacoby Brissett. And it's also a surprising thing that you can count on from Carson Wentz this year. That's been really the transformation of Carson Wentz. I mean, he's not doing much offensively, right? If you look at his EPA per play, it's pretty mediocre so far this year. I mean, let's bring up Wentz where he sits at EPA per play. So his EPA per play is 26th. So it's pretty bad so far this year. But what he's done, though, and it works if their defense was playing a little bit better. But what he's done is he's cut down on the negative plays so far this year. I mean, it's tough to have a negative plays higher than what you had last year, but if you look at his turnover-worthy play rate, he doesn't have one. Carson Wentz does not have a turnover-worthy play so far this year. Believe that or not. He was almost 5% turnover-worthy plays last year, which of course led the NFL, but he was also 3.5 the year before. So it was pretty high both of those years. His negatively graded throw rate is only 8.2% versus being 18% the year before. So he is lowering the variance there. So I think it's interesting. We have two kind of low variance, boring offenses, and his ADOT has gone down from 9.4 to 6.8, and his time to throw has gone down a little bit there. So he's really made this kind of a boring offense for Carson Wentz and for the Colts, and the same is the case for the Dolphins. Now, there isn't a ton to look at defensively. Neither one of these teams has been getting much pressure. Although if you look at what the Colts have been doing, which I think is interesting, is they're not getting a ton of pressure overall. Their pressure rank is 26, but they've been getting a lot of fast pressure. They're 7th in fast pressure so far this year. And I think that's because they were playing against Tannehill was getting the ball out quickly. Stafford was getting the ball out quickly. It's interesting. Russell Wilson was in there where he doesn't necessarily get the ball out quickly, but they didn't have a chance to get a lot of longer pressure on him because the back end was not holding up in that game. So, long story short, when we look at all the different numbers here, I would lean Indiana plus the points, even though it's in Miami here. I think the Colts have a better quarterback play. If Wentz can get that high-end stuff a little bit better, maybe be a little bit more mobile this week. They've been running the ball a little bit more effectively. I think that helps. And Wentz has been avoiding turnovers. This is a defense the defense for the Dolphins that really counts on gaining turnovers. That's what they were. They were one of the top teams in the NFL last year. They've been the top team in EPA gained off of turnovers. So we'll see if that, and they're continuing it this year with a bunch of defensive fumble luck there. So I think that's less likely to continue going forward. All right. Next on the agenda, Vikings Browns. This is an interesting one because I know a lot of people like the Browns here, -2 at the Vikings. I'm really indifferent to this game. I mean, the Browns have the top run offense in the NFL, but if you look at success rate, they're only number 4 in success rate, but they're so far above everyone else in their EPA per play running the ball. And I think that's something that's going to regress a little bit. Not that they won't continue to be the best running offense in the NFL, but they're not going to outperform their success rate by so much. They're not going to get these huge running plays that they've gotten at the same level. They'll still do it more often than others, but not at the same level. And the run offense for the Vikings, which I think can turn around a bit, has been 15th. Now, what's going to regress for the Vikings is the fact that they've had the 4th ranked passing offense And I'm not expecting that going forward, whereas the Browns have been at 11th. Some turnovers from Baker Mayfield have held that down. So these are two top 5 offensive teams overall that are going against each other. And defensively, they've both been in the middle of the pack, although the Browns were more like in the 20s before they faced against Justin Fields. So when they've had to play decent quarterbacks, right? Remember, they've had Fields and they had Tyrod Taylor was killing them before Davis Mills came in. So they've had these 2 easy matchups back to back there. Mahomes, who was Mahomes, was crushing him the week before. So I still don't think this defense has really proven anything for the Browns so far. If you look at the pressure, they are 8th in defensive pressure that they're generating, the Browns, but they're 19th in fast pressures because they've had some quarterbacks who are holding the ball, and that's how they're getting those pressures. So I think their pressure numbers are a little bit less impressive than you might think. Now, on the flip side of things, the Vikings are 2nd in pressure generated and 2nd in fast pressures. So that's good for them. The Browns have a net conversion advantage on 3rd downs of almost 7. So that's a big one. They're in the top 5 as being the best teams. And Baker's not someone who's been consistently converting on 3rd down so far this year. So that'll be an interesting one. But the Vikings have also been very, very good in their conversions so far this year. So we'll see how that ends up playing out. But I think this one is kind of a wash. It's really difficult. It'll be a fun game to watch as far as who's going to go on. But I think I wouldn't be confident either way where this is. Of course, it's a number that's between the 3s too. So I don't think there's a lot to gain off of this one. All right. So the next game on the agenda here is the Saints and the New York Football Giants. Saints are a 7-point favorite at home against the Giants. This is another stay away type of game for me. I don't really know what to do with Jameis so far this year. If you look at his rankings, he is 26th in grade and 17th in EPA. He obviously was much, much higher before he had some struggles in some recent games. But what I think is interesting about this team, the one number that I'll point out more than anything else, is that the Saints are really playing turtling on offense here. They have a pass rate of 49.4%. Now, their expected number is low because they've had some blowout wins when they have won. It's only 58%, but they're still 8.6% under expectation, which puts them dead last as far as pass rate over expectation, or first in pass rate under expectation, you could say. So they're not deriving much of an advantage there. I'll be interested to see if they let Jameis pick it up a little bit more here. I think it could be obviously beneficial for them. They haven't lost a fumble so far this year, so they've had a good score there. This is a very low implied number. This is only a 42 over under, so it's only a 17.5 implied number for the Giants this year. If you look at how they've played so far, the Giants offense has actually been a little bit better than the Saints offense. They're 16th versus 21st, but defensively the Saints have been really, really good. And I think they're going to get some pressure I'd be interested in, because they've been kind of low overall in their defensive pressure numbers. They're near the bottom of the league, but I feel like in this sort of matchup, they can be good because the Giants defense has been near the bottom of the league on how many pressures that they're giving up. So this is one I would lean a little bit towards the Saints, but it's just too difficult. This one's kind of a stay away for me just because of the up and down of Jameis, whether or not they're really going to let him pass the ball, because if they don't, I think that's a problem. And I think for the Giants, Daniel Jones has looked okay. He has a good grade, but he hasn't had a good EPA per play so far. And I think it's going to regress more towards his EPA than it is going to stay at that grade level. All right, before we continue with the rest of the games, I'm going to hit up the last ad here for Western and Southern. The Unexpected Points podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow. Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to identify your needs and address your goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernandsouthern.com/PFF. Okay. We go from one New York team to another. We have the Jets at home against the Tennessee Titans. So this is a 6.5-point spread. I'm a little bit surprised it's not higher than that, honestly, for the Titans. 44.5 over under. That gives a 19 implied number for the Jets, which means I think people think they're at home and people are not very confident in that Tennessee defense. And it makes some sense. I mean, the Tennessee defense so far this year has been 19th. Believe it or not, the Jets have been 8th in total defense, but that's a little bit skewed because they've been 7th in run defense, 17th in drop back defense, and teams have just been running the ball a ton against them because they don't have to pass the ball, right? Jets have the worst EPA per play on their passing offense, 32nd. Tennessee is actually 21st, which is surprising. And I think part of that is because of fumbles. So I'm going to talk about this when it comes to the Titans. I do think Ryan Tannehill is susceptible to strip sacks, and that's part of the fumble problems that they've had so far on this team. But they've been the unluckiest as far as fumble EPA lost. They haven't gotten any fumbles. They haven't gained any EPA, fumble recoveries on defense, and they've lost almost 22 points on offense. So that's by far the worst. And if you look at the Jets actually haven't lost a fumble on offense, and they've gained 13 EPA on defense. So the Jets have actually been lucky in the context of being so awful everywhere else. The problem for this game, of course, is injuries for the Titans. Why you wouldn't be more confident, and this is probably what is holding down the number in this game, is the fact that people are concerned about the injuries. So as of now, it looks like AJ Brown is out. I think it might be safe at this point to assume that Julio Jones is going to be out. I mean, they haven't moved Brown to IR, I don't think. So I'm not quite sure about that one. But if Julio Jones and AJ Brown don't play, then you got some issues because you got Josh Reynolds, you got Nick Westbrook, Akine, or whatever you pronounce his last name out there. You got Chester Rogers. Those are going to be your guys out there trying to make plays. Anthony Firkser, I believe, is back. So he'll be able to play there. So that's a little bit of a concern for the Titans and what's keeping this number down. But I don't think it's as big of a concern as others might think, because of the fact that this is a team that, they don't pass the ball a ton. They're 30th in their pass rate over expectation. They're 7.5% less than what you would expect there. What I thought was interesting is defensive pressure. This Titans defense, they're actually 6th in defensive pressure. They're only 16th in the fast pressure, but they're not, it hasn't been as bad as I would have thought, right? And they're not giving up a ton of pressure offensively. So I think that's at least a little bit interesting as far as how the Titans can win this game. And I don't know, I would lean towards them at 6.5, even though they're a 6.5-point favorite, but I'm not in love with either one here. And from a Jets perspective, I don't think Wilson has been as bad as maybe the EPA implies. He's actually at a higher grade than Trevor Lawrence, at least going into week 4. Lawrence probably going to bump above him here, but he's been bad. There's no way to get around the fact that he's been bad. And I don't necessarily think this is going to turn around because of all the different moving pieces that they're trying to get working here on offense. Probably no Elijah Moore this week too, although the return of Jameson Crowder. So that could help. That could be a net benefit to having a safety blanket there, because Corey Davis is just not showing he can be that guy to be super reliable, despite the fact that Wilson is really targeting him at a very high rate so far this year. Okay. Next on the agenda, Philly KC. This is an interesting one. I know everyone's going to love to potentially tease this one, but they won't move it up above 7 because it'll get teased down. So KC is a 7-point favorite at Philly. It's a 54.5 over under. So that means a 30 3/4. So over 30 points is the implied total for KC, 23 points for the Eagles. The KC still has the number 1 offense in the NFL, believe it or not, when you net out some of those fumbles that they've had, because they got 3 different fumbles, right? They had Edwards-Helaire a couple of times, and then Tyreek Hill after a catch last week. So they've been getting killed on their fumbles. They're a negative 14.3 as far as the net on the fumbles so far this year. So that's something that's held them down. Their defense is dead last in EPA per play. That's been very, very troubling. So you have to figure that's probably going to regress to get a little bit better. I'm a little bit annoyed by the Chiefs only being 4th in pass percentage over expectation. They're at 5.9%, where in prior years, they've been well over 10%, and they've been first in prior years. They need to get back to that. I know that the rushing offense outside of the fumbles hasn't been bad for Edwards-Helaire, but they're also increasing their under center looks. It was very small before, don't get me wrong, but they're increasing their play action under center and their under center looks generally. And I don't get that. I don't get they're doing there. Mahomes has always been more successful out of play action from the shotgun than he has been play action under center. I think it takes away some of his strengths, having his back to the defense when he plays like that, rather than just letting him dissect what's going on out of the shotgun. So I'm hoping that they'll do a little bit less of that going forward. Also, Mahomes has always been one of those weird guys who didn't get any benefit from playing in play action under center versus a lot of other offenses that do. And if you look at the net conversions, I mean, Mahomes continues to convert late downs over expectation, but that's something that I think is sticky going forward. But the defense is giving up a ton of third down conversions. And with Justin Herbert continuing to do that all the time, Baker Mayfield was able to do that. Lamar Jackson had a couple of plays where he's able to do that. So I think that's interesting. The Chiefs defense is really getting no pressure. So Jalen Hurts is going to have some time here to throw, which I think will be interesting. And I'm kind of interested in the fact that the Eagles are actually sixth in pass rate over expectation. So they're not afraid to pass the ball here, which I think can be good or bad, depending upon whether or not Hurts can avoid turnovers, because that's what killed them in the Cowboys game. So I would lean Kansas City here. 7 points is a lot, though. But I would still think that the problem with Kansas City is they just don't do the things that you're hoping they're going to do to press their advantage. That is going for on fourth downs, passing a little bit more, not running it as much as they've been running it so far here. Not playing under center. I don't get playing under center with this offense at all. So you kind of hope those things revert a little bit, because they're trying to transform their offense a little bit more with more running plays and more under center work. And I would say let's not do that as much unless they don't have confidence in that offensive line. But they spent so much money in draft capital with the trade for Orlando Brown there. They need to show a little bit more confidence in that offensive line going forward. Okay, next is the Rams of Los Angeles, the 3-0 Rams of Los Angeles against the 3-0 Arizona Cardinals. It is it's 4 points. It's in LA, 54.5 over under. So that gives an implied of 29.25 for the Rams and 25.25 for the Cardinals. So the Rams, number one drop back offense in the league. And the thing here is, are we confident that Matthew Stafford will continue to be this super efficiency producer? Maybe. I mean, he's converted 4 more first downs than you would have expected. So again, he had those big third down conversions to Deshaun Jackson last week, which I think helped extremely. They haven't been running the ball well, but it hasn't really mattered for them so far. And if you look at what they've been doing as far as their pass rate over expectation, where are they? They are 7. So they're 5.3 over expectation. So they've done a good job juicing that passing game. I mentioned on the wrap up that they did a really good job as far as how they game planned against the Bucs last week and just allowed them to pass quite a bit there. If you look at their drop back success rate versus efficiency, the Rams are 4th or 5th in success rate, and they're 1st in efficiency. So again, will that continue? It might, because of this offense and a new turnaround, but we are seeing some warning signs for potential regression in those two different categories. Now, defensively, let's look at some of the pressure numbers. We're looking in the trenches here. Both teams have been really good at avoiding pressure offensively. As far as fast pressures are concerned, the Cardinals have been the 3rd best team in avoiding fast pressures. The Rams have been the 4th, so they're getting the ball out quickly and avoiding those there. And defensively, the Cardinals have actually been better as far as getting fast pressures. They're 12th versus 22nd for the Rams. So the Rams aren't getting quite as much pressure as you would have hoped on defense too. So I think I like the Cardinals in this game, plus the 4 points. You're getting over the 3, so that's good. I think they're probably as good of a team. I haven't been as much of a believer offensively in what the Cardinals are doing, but they haven't been as reliant as they were last year. The problem last year was they were so reliant on Kyler and his running ability, the first half of the season when they were outperforming, right? And if you look at Kyler this year, he has 2.5 EPA in scrambles, and his rush EPA is basically flat. It's almost nothing. And those numbers were huge. I mean, you look at the full season numbers. Remember, these are numbers that dropped severely in the second half of the season for Kyler. He was 35 EPA from scrambles last year, 20 EPA from rushing the ball. He was getting these long touchdown runs rushing the ball. So they haven't been reliant upon that this year. Yet his EPA per play, even without this huge rushing advantage he was getting last year, his EPA per play is up to 0.17 versus 0.08 last year. If you look at the rankings for my man Kyler, let's look. He is 9th in EPA, ranking 5th in grade. So his grade's even better than his EPA, and that would have been the exact opposite before. So I'm starting to get a little bit confident in this offense. I don't think that A.J. Green's been that positive of an addition, but at least he's a body who they can rely on better than Larry Fitzgerald. They have Rondale Moore they can bring in there. They haven't faced the stiffest defenses so far, but they have, let me see, who have they faced so far? So they faced Tennessee in week 1. I remember that. Minnesota and Jacksonville. Of course, they beat up on Jacksonville quite a bit, but they were playing even well before that. So, I'm not believing in Kyler yet, but there's been enough positive signs there, I think, that you can be okay. There's more reasons for the Rams to regress a bit on what they'll be doing offensively than the Cardinals. And they're both these 3-0 teams. You're getting a little bit of a power rating advantage for the Rams at -4. So I think it's interesting. I probably wouldn't play it either way. I just enjoy the game. But I think that the Cardinals are moving up my rankings as far as a team that I might actually be able to believe in this year. Okay. Getting into more of the late games here. Denver, Baltimore. Now, this one is one that I would make a play, and that is for the Denver Broncos. They're +1, so it doesn't really matter. We're between the three, so it doesn't matter a whole lot there. The total is 44.5. The implied for the Broncos is 21.75 versus 22.75 for the Ravens. I'm liking the Broncos quite a bit. They're 22nd in run offense, but 3rd in drop back offense. So they haven't been running the ball that well, but again, who cares, right? Does running really matter that much? I mean, Bridgewater's been a bit better as far as his EPA than his success rate, so maybe that will revert a little bit. There are some issues with KJ Hamler not being there now, so they don't have Judy and Hamler. But all that being said, the defense has been really, really good. And again, I talked about this on Tuesday about they ain't played nobody. I think Denver's getting unfairly punished from the fact that they ain't played nobody. But look, we just saw the Jaguars play a pretty good game against the Bengals, right, on Thursday night. So, yeah, they played the Jets. They played the Jaguars. They played the Giants, and the Giants looked pretty good the Thursday night before that against the Redskins. So, number one, I don't know if they ain't played nobody. And number two, if you're going to ain't play nobody, you better destroy those nobodies. And that's what they've done so far, is absolutely literally crush these teams, right? They're 5th in total offense, despite not running the ball well at all. And they're running the ball a lot with leads. And they are 2nd in total defense, 1st against the pass. So if you look at the passing angles of it, which are most important, 3rd in EPA per play, offensively dropping back, 1st against opponents' dropbacks. Very, very strong. Baltimore, 28th against opponents' dropbacks. And you could say, oh, well, they played against the Mahomes, so that's part of it there. Yeah, that's part of it. But they also lost to the Raiders, who, Derek Carr is playing well this year. Don't get me wrong, but they gave up a ton there. And the Lions, they barely won that game. I know there were some Marquise Brown drops, but they barely won that game there. So Denver's actually fumbled the ball a ton. So they've lost more off of fumbles than what you would have expected there. I don't know if it's that important. They've been right in line with expectation as far as their passing is concerned, which I think is good. The Ravens are lower. It was interesting that Lamar only ran the ball. He had a couple of design runs last week, and I think that's a problem if they're not going to be doing that a lot more going forward. And if you look at the pressures right now, the the Broncos are getting 15th in pressure and the pressure percentage, and the Ravens are only 30th. So I think this is a trench advantage here for the Broncos too. So there's just a lot of things that are pointing towards the Broncos. I like betting on teams who are destroying bad teams, because everyone's going to discount that as if they're barely winning against bad teams. That's not the case. And it's tough to play in Denver. Denver's always had a traditional advantage with the altitude, especially early in the season. So I think that's another advantage that the Broncos will have. And I'm willing to take that point and go with the Broncos this week. Okay. And the next matchup in the afternoon is Green Bay, Pittsburgh. Oh, yikes. Now, this is one of those ones where you look at it and you say, 6.5 points, that's a lot against a good Pittsburgh defense. It's going to have TJ Watt back. But can anyone bet on Pittsburgh right now? I don't think so. I mean, Roethlisberger was cooked. He's the most likely of being cooked because he was even cooked last season. Offensively, they're 27th in EPA per play. But defensively, they're 20th. Now, they're only 26th against the pass, though, which is a little bit surprising, but some of that is based upon the fact that they got crushed efficiency-wise by Joe Burrow when TJ Watt wasn't there. Both of these teams have actually had more fumble luck than you would have expected. They're both passing over expectation. The Packers are giving up more pressures and fast pressures than anyone in the NFL, which is shocking, although that did not happen against the 49ers. So maybe they're getting things together a little bit this year. And the Pittsburgh is also giving up a ton of pressure so far this year. This is an interesting one only from the perspective of, can Green Bay do what they need to do? I probably wouldn't touch it, though, at 6.5. It's just a little too many questions for me on both of these teams. So I'm gonna pass on that one. And then New England, Tampa Bay. Let me go San Francisco, Seattle first. So San Francisco, Seattle. This one is a 3-point favorite, are the Niners. It is a 52. That's a big total. 27.5 implied for them, 24.5 for the Seahawks. If you look at the team so far this year, no one believes in San Francisco. No one believes in Jimmy Garoppolo, but he continues to be efficient from a EPA perspective. His grading's in the 20s, but he's 5th in drop back offense for the 49ers, 11th for the Seahawks. The Seahawks had this huge advantage in their EPA per play versus their success rate, and that regressed a bit and kind of got back to normal, which was a problem. They're still performing way, way better from a drop back efficiency standpoint than from a drop back success rate. They're in the bottom half for their success rate, but they're in the top half in their efficiency. So that's something to continue to monitor and maybe worry a little bit about going forward for them. The Seahawks are also second in their run offense in EPA per play, and maybe that'll continue, but we don't know about that necessarily. The Niners have really had downside here from a fumble perspective. They haven't gained any EPA defensively from fumbles, and they've lost 14. So I think that's a reason to like them a little bit here. The Seahawks 5th pass rate over expectation, so that's pretty strong for them. They've been getting more pressure. The Niners have not been getting pressure, which is shocking, but the Seattle offensive line has been the 3rd worst as far as giving up fast pressures here. So I think that is potentially a problem for Seattle here if the Niners can get their scheme turned around. Now, injuries are issues here. Let me just go to the injury lineup here to go through all this different stuff. So the injury reports, a lot of questionable guys here. Josh Norman's questionable, probably out. Jason Verrett, we knew about that. ACL a while ago, that's happening. Elijah Mitchell will be back in the backfield. Probably doesn't matter that much. Kinlaw is questionable. They're going to have to piece together some stuff defensively here. And I think Lockett and Metcalf and Estridge are all be fine for the Seahawks, so I don't think that's a problem there, but all those guys are questionable, so we'll have to see. If anything here, I would actually lean towards the 49ers, even though your 3 points is not ideal, but I wouldn't necessarily play this either way, but I think they would be the more undervalued team out of these two at this point in time. Okay, it's time. New England, Tampa Bay. The matchup everyone's looking for. The promo, God, that they ran for that thing last week, it was like some sort of action movie, suspense, horror all together as far as these two guys getting back getting back at each other. Tampa Bay, 7-point favorite in New England. Tampa Bay's run defense is doing what it can do. It's kind of a flipped here. They're third best running the ball. The opponents are just passing like crazy against Tampa Bay. So we'll see, because that really does not match up very well with what New England's tried to do this year. New England is mid-tier as far as their pass rate over expectation, but that shifted a lot this last game where they were playing from behind and had to pass a lot. Ideally, they would not be passing a lot at all. Tampa Bay is number 1 in pass rate over expectation. They're 15% over expectation. They've been passing a ton. Both of these teams have suffered from poor fumble luck. Shockingly, Tampa Bay has not been converting third downs. They actually have 2 fewer third down conversions than expected, which is weird because Tom Brady is normally a guy who's over there. So that has some chance to revert going forward. They're creating as much, they're taking a lot of pressure. Actually, Brady's taking a decent amount of pressure. So that's something to watch if that continues going forward. I really don't have a play on this one either. 7 points is a lot on the road, although I think that supposedly money is just flooding in on the Bucs right now. According to our numbers, let's see if we have the numbers to back that up. So according to our numbers, 88% of the cash is coming in on the Bucs and 90% of the tickets. So everything is flowing in there. People probably don't want to go up to 7.5, maybe in some of these books, because then it'll get teased down through a couple of key numbers. So it's sticking at 7 right now. So there could be a little bit of value on Tampa Bay because of that, but I'm going to stay away from that one generally. And our last game of the week is going to be the Chargers against your undefeated Las Vegas Raiders. 3 points. Chargers are at home. It's a 3-point number. 51.5 over under. 27.25 implied for the Chargers. 24.25 for Vegas. Vegas had a worse run offense in the NFL. They got to stop running the ball. What is their expectation? Their run rate? They're 10th in pass over expectation. You got to boost that up, buddy. Can't run the ball for crap over there. They're 6th in their drop back offense, 8th for the Chargers. Herbert's actually probably been better than 8th. It's just he's had a lot of interception problems there. He had that weird strip sack in week 1-2, which has held it down. The run defense has been really poor for the Chargers, so maybe the Vegas can get something going here on the ground. But both defenses have been good against the dropback. That's what's surprising. The Chargers 9th despite playing Patrick Mahomes, and Vegas is 13th despite the fact that they played against Lamar Jackson. So total defense, the Raiders are actually 11th right now, which is, we'll see if that continues, but it's pretty shocking. Now, the Chargers got really lucky fumbles, and a lot of that was in that KC game. They've actually gained about 15.8 points in fumbles. So have the Raiders, though, but 15.8 points is a lot that they've gained there. So that's something to keep a look on going forward. They're giving up a lot of pressures for the Chargers, and so that their blocking maybe has been as good as expected. And both teams are converting at a very high rate over expectation, but the Chargers, the Raiders defense has also been keeping teams from converting there. So the Chargers have benefited a little bit more net as far as leg down conversions, but that's something that could be sustainable for Herbert. 3 points. I don't really like this one on either side either. Maybe I'd lean a little bit towards Vegas because, again, it's a nobody believe in us type of team, but I'm not really going to go either way on that one other than enjoying the matchup. So to wrap up here, the plays I feel the strongest about, and we'll, track these. I'll give myself credit for Jacksonville, which I called my lock of the century of the week earlier here. So the plays we're going to track here is Washington -1.5. That was one of the ones that I liked a lot here. Carolina +4.5 was another one that I liked a lot. And I'm trying to see, was there another one that I really liked? No, I think those are the two that I really liked the most. Oh, I'm sorry, Denver +1. So those are my 3 for Sunday. Plus, we already logged. I'll already give myself credit for Jacksonville +7.5 on Thursday. But the other ones, Washington -1.5, Carolina +4.5, and Denver +1. I have a model for over-unders, but I'm not so confident in that one, and I don't think it's as fun to talk about either. So I hope all of these, the stat review has helped, especially those stats which are a little bit of the flukier ones that are going in there, and a way to look at this. And this is also backed up by some modeling that I've done in putting together some of the most underplayed stats within spreads and totals. Have fun watching games this weekend. I'll be back at you on Tuesday to review the week and review in detail the most important games from the weekend. Until then, leave a review on iTunes. If you want to leave a review there, you can also leave a question and I'll go ahead and answer that. I appreciate everyone tuning in, and I'll talk at you again on Tuesday.